Beruchim haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Tes Amud Beis at the very top. The Gemara is discussing whether you can use the space keneged the lechi at the entranceway of the mavui. Rava B'das Rabbi Yochanan says that you could use the space, the metaltil, keneged this lechi. The Gemara had asked a question and said, if that's indeed true, then why does Rabbi Yochanan say that when you have a case of a mavui, with not just one lechi, but you have several lechim within dalet fachim of each other, going across of about 2 or 3 amos? Why does Rabbi Yochanan say that will then bring us to a machlokes between Rabbi Shimon Gamliel and the Rabbanon? Meaning, that Rabbi Shimon Gamliel holds that we still say lavud as long as it's less than dalet tfachim, whereas the Rabbanan say no, it has to be within 3 tfachim. So therefore, according to the Rav Shimon Gamliel, all of these lechim would be really one thick lechi, because we would say lavud. Whereas according to the Rabbanan, it would just be one lechi. In other words, according to Rav Shimon Gamliel, you could only carry in that mavui from the innermost corner of the innermost lechi. Whereas according to the Rabbanan, you could carry up until the innermost corner of the outer lechi. So if indeed Rabbi Yochanan says you can use the space next to the lechi, so then there should not be a machlokes. Everybody would agree they can use it next to the lechi, because even Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, who says that it's all one thick lechi, so you could still use the space next to the lechi. And according to the Rabbanan, you could also use the space next to the outer lechi, so there's no machlokes. To which the Gemara explained, B'das Rava, that you could still use the space next to the lechi, and it's not a kasha that Rabbi Yochanan said this, because this brisa is talking about where on the other side of the mavui is a karmelis. And just like the other side is a karmelis, so too then this area next to the lechi would have the same din as the karmelis. That's why you cannot use the space next to the lechi in this brisa. The Gemara now brings over here on Daf Tes Amud Beis another way to explain why this is not going to be a kasha on the shita of Rava B'das Rabbi Yochanan. Rav Ashi Omar, says the Gemara, Rav Ashi tells us another situation in this brisa. Kigon sheyart rotzful belachayim pachos me'arba b'meshech arba amos. He explains that we're talking about over here that the lechim that go across less than arba tfachim from one another are spanning a 4 amos length of this mavui, whereby that 4 amos is going to be very significant. The Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, the Amar Amina Lavud, Havule Mavui Vitzarch Lechi, Achle Hatiroi. According to Shimon Gamliel, who says this, we do say Lavud, then all these lechim are going to be one thick lechi that's going to span 4 amos, which is really a hechsher mavui. It's a wall of a mavui. Therefore, the present lechi is not going to be satisfactory. You'd have to have another lechi in its place to allow tiltul in the mavui. Whereas the Rabbanon, who do not say lavud in less than arba tfachim, they will say that you can go ahead and use the outer lechi, and that's sufficient. So here we have another explanation of that brisa that seemed to be a question on Rava, which implies perhaps that you cannot use the space keneged the lechi. No, over here we can still explain the machlokes of Shimon Gamliel and the Rabbanan the way we just did, and it doesn't then contradict the fact that you can still use the space that's keneged the lechi. Says the Gemara, now that you said Rabbi Shimon Gamliel explains that you would need in this scenario, when it spans 4 amos, that you would have to then have another lechi, ask the Gemara, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, lahave benira mi bachutz v'shama b'fnim. Typically, a person puts the lechi where it's on the end of the entranceway of the mavui, which is a little bit outside of the mavui, a little bit outside, a little bit inside as well. So once you have a little bit on the outside, ask the Gemara, it's nirei mi bachutz. You can see from the outside that this is now the beginning of, let's say, the fourth wall, which is the entranceway of the mavui. V'shavah b'fnim, and it's running flush from the inside, so it doesn't appear to be anything other than a thick wall. So then you should then have a valid lechi. Why do you have to then have another lechi according to the Shita of Shem Gamliel? Answers the Gemara, Midei have a time el Rabbi Yochanan. All of this is to explain the Shita of Rabbi Yochanan. Haki also Ravin Amar Rabbi Yochanan, and that which Ravin came and explained the Shita of Rabbi Yochanan, Nira mi bachutz v'sham b'fnim eino nidon b'shum lechi. Rabbi Yochanan's Shita is if you have such a lechi that is Nira mi bachutz, that appears from the outside to be a lechi, which is the beginning of a fourth wall, even though it's running flush, whereby in the inside, if you would look from the inside, it would just look like the thickness of the entrance to the mavui. Still, he says, that's not going to be considered to be a lechi. So that's why, according to Hashem Gamliel, you would need to provide a new lechi to permit tiltul in this mavui. The Gemara now discusses the positioning of the lechi in the entranceway to the mavui. We said before, typically, the lechi has part of it on the outside and part of it on the inside of the mavui. But what happens when you put the entire lechi on the outside of the entire lechi in the inside? Says the Gemara, Itmar, Nira mi bifnim v'shava mi bachutz, Nido mishum lechi. If you were to put the lechi in such a way where it's Nira mi bifnim, if you put it in the inside in a way that it would be appearing from the one who is standing on the inside, like a lechi from the inside, the hainu, like a beginning of a fourth wall, but it was shava mi bachutz on the outside, it would be running flush, looking like it was just the thickness of the outer wall. So then, according to this statement, it would be considered to be a lechi, because since it's going to be, for those who are inside, recognizable as a lechi, then it's satisfactory because we see that it's going to be then the beginning of a fourth wall. Nira mi bachutz v'shava mivnef. However, it's only recognizable from the outside, it's visible from the outside to be a beginning of a fourth wall, but from the inside it will run flush, looking like a thick part of the present wall. Then it's a machlokes whether you consider this be a lechi or not. Rabbi Chia, Rabbi Shimon bar Rabbi Chad Amar nidoin mishum lechi, v'chad Amar einoi nidoin mishum lechi. One of them holds that it's considered to be a lechi, while the other one says it's not considered a lechi. In other words, the one who says that it's considered to be a lechi, so it's satisfactory that from the people on the outside can see it as a wall, a beginning of a wall. The other one says, no, you have to have the people on the inside to appreciate that it's going to be the beginning of a wall, to be a valid lechi. Says the Gemara, Tistayim the Rabbi Chia, hu da Omar nidoin mishum lechi. Let us conclude that it's Rabbi Chia of the two that says that it's considered to be a lechi. Why? The Tani, Rabbi Chia, because Rabbi Chia taught the following brisa. Koisel shetzidoi echad kanois mechaveroi. If you have a wall that is going to be jutting in, let's say you have a wall of the two mavuis, right? And the entrance, it goes like this, or it goes like this. So then he says the following. He says, if you have such a wall that is whether it's visible from the outside because it's jutting from the outside, it appears to be a lechi, the beginning of the wall. Nidoin, or that's the opposite, or it's jutting in the inside and it appears from people on the inside to be the fourth wall, but from the outside it looks flush. Then nidon mishum lechi, then you can still determine that's considered to be a lechi either way. Tistayim. So now we conclude that indeed it's Rabbi Chia of the opinions that said that even if it looks, it's visible from the outside and it's flush from the inside, it's still considered to be a lechi. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan milo shmiya leha. Did Rabbi Yochanan not hear this brisa that we just quoted in the name of Rabbi Chia? That Rabbi Chia had just taught. Ela shmiya le v'lo savala. Rabbi Yochanan did hear this brisa, only he did not agree with it. Says the Gemara, Rebbe Chia nami loy savar lo. Rebbe Chia maybe then he didn't also agree with it. Ask the Gemara, hi mai, why should that be so? In other words, what kind of argument is that? Bishlama Rabbi Yochanan loy savar lo. It's well that you say Rabbi Yochanan did not hold of this brisa. That's mishum hochi lo tani lo, and that's why he didn't teach the brisa. But Ella Reb Chia Isa de loy savar lo lama leila misna. If Reb Chia did not hold of this brisa as being a valid brisa, why did he teach it? It must be the fact that he taught it. He considers it to be a viable, accurate brisa. Says the Gemara weiter. Omar Rabbe bar Rav Huna Nira mi bachutz v'shava mi bifnim nidoin mishum lechi. We bring over here the statement of Rabbe bar Rav Huna that does say that if you have a lechi that is visible from the outside and is flush from the inside, that it's considered to be a lechi, just like we said in the name of Rabbi Chia as well. Omar Rabbe said, Umozbinan ashmaitzen. Let us ask from our Mishnah on this halacha. That halacha that you just stated, again, that it's visible from the outside, but from the inside, it looks just to be a thickness of the wall, and it's still considered to be a lechi. Let's ask from the following Mishnah. Chatzer ketana shenifretza ligedoila. If you have a chatzer that's ketana, a small, narrow chatzer, and the back wall of this chatzer has a breach on its entire wall, that it goes into a larger chatzer, which is wider. It states over here in the Mishnah, Gedoyla muteris v'ketana asura, b'bnei shike psischa shel gedoyla. The bigger chatzer is mutter to the taltil inside of it, but the smaller one is like a pesach, an entranceway to the larger, more wide chatzer gedoyla, and there you cannot go ahead and carry. V'im isa, if it's true what we just stated, that when it's visible from the outside and it's flush from the inside, it's considered to be a lechi, then why don't we just say the same thing over here in the case of the chatzer ketana that went into the chatzer gedoyla? The chatzer gedoyla is considered to be from the outside. And from the outside, from the perspective of someone who's standing in the chatzer gedoyla, you would see that indeed you have a lechi from the breach of the chatzer ketana. Whereas if you stood on the inside of the chatzer, from the chatzer ketana's perspective, then it would look flush. So therefore, you have the same scenario. Ask the Gemara. V'im isa ketana nami tishtari benira b'bachut v'sham b'fnim. Why don't we say then the same thing? That if we say it's visible from the outside, even though it's flush from the inside, it's considered to be a lechi, then you'd have a proper lechi over here too in the case of the chatzer ketana. Allow being carried in the chatzer ketana because of the lechi. Answers the Gemara Amra Bizeira benichnosim koisle ketana ligdoila. This chatzer ketana, which is more narrow, that opens up to a bigger chatzer gedoila, its length, its walls extend into the chatzer gedoila. So before it actually gets wide, there's also part of the walls of the chatzer ketana that are entering into the chatzer gedoila. Before those walls, however, then it goes ahead and opens up into the chatzer gedola. So here we don't have a proper lechi to then rely upon. Ask the Gemara, V'lema lava v'tishtri, if you're going to say that these walls of the chatzer ketana extend into the chatzer gedola, before and before they extend, you have the extension of the wideness of the chatzer gedola. So even the area where the walls of the chatzer ketana go into the chatzer gedola, until the walls of the chatzer gedola begin, why don't we say lavud and close up those walls, whereby we'll be left with a lechi once again? Ask the Gemara again, v'leima lavud v'tishtari. Why don't we say lavud, but let's close that space and thereby have a valid lechi? Answers the Gemara v'chitema, or the Gemara still says v'chitema, you can't do that, you can't make lavud because the mafligi tuva, because you have too much space between the length of the walls of the chatzer ketana and the wall of the chatzer gedola is too wide beyond the state of lechi. According to the Rabbanim, more than 3 tfachim. According to Rav Shimon Gamliel, more than 4 tfachim. if you're going to say that, v'chitem the miflegi tuva v'hotani Rav Adebar Avimi kamed Rabbi Yachanina kitano be'eser gedoyla ba'achadesrei. He says the dimensions of this Mishnah is talking about where the chatzar kitana is 10, and it opens up to a chatzar gedoyla of 11, which means you have half a amma on one side and half a amma on the other side where it opens up to. In other words, you have 3 tfachim on both sides between the chatzar kitana and the chatzar gedoyla. So why don't we then say lavud? Because part of the partition is a little bit, which makes it so it's less than 3 tfachim. You can say lavud and close that space, allowing a lechi. Answers the Gemara Amaravina b'miflogin b'koisel ze b'shnayim u'mikoisel ze b'dalid. Sorry, b'muflogin b'koisel ze b'shnayim u'mikoisel ze b'dalid. Ravina says we're not talking about where the chatzar katan is opening up exactly in the middle of the chatzar gedoyla, but rather it's off to the side a little bit, where there's only 2 tfachim on one side and 4 tfachim on the other side. So the fact that you have 4 tfachim on one side doesn't give you lechi, doesn't give you lavud. Ask the Gemara, but still, v'leima lavud miruach achas v'tishri. But on the side of the 2 tfachim, you do have lavud. Closing that up will give you a lechi. The top of Yud Amud Aleph, the Gemara says, Rabbi he, the Omar Ba'inan Shtei Pasim. Because the Shita of Rabbi is that you need 2 lechi, one on each side of the chotzer to be matir, the tiltul in the chotzer. Unlike a regular case of a mavui where 1 lechi is sufficient, meaning 1 lechi on one side is sufficient, one side of the entrance, when it comes to a chotzer, to matir tiltul chotzer, you need to have a lechi on both sides of the entranceway. So Rabbi requires two pasim, 2 lechis. The Tanya, chotzer niteres bepas echod. The Tanakama says over here in the Brisa that a chotzer is niteres with 1 lechi. Rabbi Omer bishnei pasim, but Rabbi requires 2, a lechi on each side of the entranceway to the chotzer. So over here in this scenario, you only have 1 because the other side is 4 tfachim. We don't say lavud. Ask the Gemara if this is the explanation of this Mishnah. Hi mai. The Gemara asks, what is this? The Gemara is going to challenge this. Iamris bishlama nidra mi bachutz v'shama bifnim einoi nido mishum lechi. It's fine if you want to say that which is visible from the outside but is flush from the inside is not considered to be a lechi. The Rabbi sover like Rabbi Yosi, and Rabbi holds like Rabbi Yosi that each lechi has to be 3 tfachim wide. Ud Rabbi Zera, ud Ravina Lesa, and we don't have Rabbi Zera that says you have to talk about you have to make an okimta that the walls of the chatzar is going into the chatzar gedoyla. And you also don't have to say, like Ravina, that it's off to the side as opposed to being in the middle where it's 3 tfachim on both sides. You don't have to come on to all of that. Because of all of this, we can understand then that since, again, that when it's visible from the outside and it's flush from the inside, you don't have a lechi, then you could explain that over here, the scenario is talking about where the chatzar kitana is 10, and the chatzar gedola is 11, where you have 3 tfachim on both sides. Then, even if you do have lavud, in other words, you do have a lechi, still that's not going to help you to be carried into the chatzar, because over here we say if it's visible from the outside and it's not visible from the inside, like the scenario over here, you cannot carry in the chatzar. In this case, the chatzar ketana. So then it'll be very good. Mishum de Rabbi Silver like Rabbi Yosi. That was understood because you need 3 tfachim for each lechi on both sides. But if you want to say that if you do look at from the outside and it's visible from the outside to be an extension of the wall, but from the inside it's flush, only looking at as a thickness to the existing wall, whereby if that's the case, you say that's considered to be a good lechi, then I'll ask you, Ud Rabbi Zeir of Ravina Isan, we have to establish, like Rabbi Zeir and Rabbi Ravina, that the small chatzar extends into the chatzar gedola. And we also said that's not exactly in the middle, but rather it's to the side, 4 on one side and 2 tfachim on the other side. If that's the case, then V'Rebbe lo sover like Rabbi Yossi, and Rebbe does not hold like Rabbi Yossi that you need 3 tefachim for each lechi. It's enough to have even, let's say, a tefach. Gedola ba'achas esrei lamali. Then why do we have to establish that the Chatzar Gedola is 11 amos? Why is it necessary? Harei mimonavshach ile mishra legedola kaasi. If we want to then come to matir, being metaltal in the Chatzar Gedola, then be'eser v'shnei tefachim sagi. It would be enough to have just eser amos and a tefach each side, because Rebbe requires two lechim, but it does not require, like Rabbi Yossi, that it be 3 tefach each. So therefore, you can have still the same scenario where it's one when it's 10 amos and 1 tefach on each side. But if it's coming to say that we want to oiser the tiltul in these chatzar ketana, and that's why it's coming to tell me these dimensions of the chatzar gedol and chatzar ketana as being 10 and 11, then mifli gituva. Then you should say there should be more than 11 amos as the Chatzar Gedola. Then there will be no possibility of saying lavud on each side, whereby for sure you cannot carry within the Chatzar Ketana. Elalav shmamina must be nira mi bachut v'sham bifnim einoi nido mishum lechi. It must be, like we said before, that if you can only perceive from the outside, but you cannot perceive from the inside, because from the outside it looks like it's going to be a beginning of a 4th wall, but from the inside it looks flush, then it's not a lechi. Shmamina, we can derive from this indeed that would not be considered to be a viable lechi.